Hello, and welcome back to France Made Simple, the podcast where I demystify life in France and debunk some of the many myths that surround living here and basically tell it like it is. So, this morning, I'm very pleased to announce that finally, after a whole host of technical issues, I'm being joined in the studio by Ellen, who's come along to chat to us about her experience of being in France and, how different it is being here as an American, because I know I've got an increasing number of American listeners, and frequently I have to caveat stuff by saying, well, that's how it is in the UK, but I'm not really sure how it is in the States. So we're trying to get more and more Americans on the show. So thank you very much, Ellen, for coming along this morning.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. Thank you for your patience this morning. And I think my can-do American attitude really showed through this morning with our technical difficulties.
Oh, well, we got there in the end.
Yeah,
I think that was a clear case of girl power in
yeah.
action. So, Ellen, maybe you could start by telling our listeners a bit about yourself and your background and how you come to be here.
Sure. So I'm originally from the United States, from Connecticut, so the East Coast. And back in the United States, I was a French teacher. I taught middle school French, so the age there is like 11 to 13. I taught there for 6 years. I did some study abroad programs in France, as many French teachers do. And I found a French man that I fell in love with, and so I moved here to join him.
Oh, oh. And how long have you been in France?
I moved in the fall of 2019, so this fall that will make 7 years.
Okay.
It's been a
All
while.
right. So a good length of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and long enough to, I suppose, get your head round all the little cultural differences between France and the USA.
Yes, for sure.
So, what do you think if we're going to talk cultural differences, which is something that I find absolutely fascinating? Because, especially for me, I think that, the UK is geographically so close to France that we often think we're just going to pop across the channel and it will be just like the UK, but with slightly better weather and wine. And it's so different culturally. And I think that culture shock is something that a lot of expats or immigrants to France, British ones, certainly struggle with. So, how's it been for you?
It's taken a while to adjust to things. But obviously the first time I came here, it was very different. A lot of things struck me as very different. So I moved here officially in 2019, but I had been to France multiple times previously for studying abroad, or working in France. I actually worked in an elementary school in France as well, and that was probably where I had the most culture shocks. And for me, I think one of the biggest things that stood out was just the rhythm of the day and the different pauses during the day, how things slow down a little bit more, and especially around meal times and socializing. So working in the French school, I would be there during lunchtime, and all the teachers would sit and have their lunch together, and they would sit for like an hour in the lunchroom. That would never happen in the United States, where we would have like 15 or 20 minutes for lunch.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I've also worked in French schools, and again, totally unlike the UK, everybody grabs a sandwich at their desk there
Hmm.
and works through their lunch hour or rushes off to do the shopping or pick up cat food or something.
Hmm.
And it was, I think, the thing that really surprised me that there was, a proper restaurant basically for the teachers. And,
Hmm.
when I had one job interview at one particular private school, they told me very proudly during the interview that they had a very good chef there and the patisseries were excellent. And it was
Yeah,
just, it was just, I can't imagine that coming up in a job interview for at a school in the UK, the
that's
importance that
crazy.
placed on food and meal
Hmm.
times.
And that starts so early too, in those elementary schools where they learn to have, those different meals and their cheese and their bread and they're drinking water at the table and they're serving each other too and using real cutlery and plates and stuff like that. It starts early.
Yeah, and using napkins, even if they are tea towels tied around their necks for the really little ones.
Yeah.
No, I think it's brilliant. And I mean, my kids were all born in the UK, but
Mm.
we moved to France when they were 7, 5, and 1. And obviously, they went straight into school, the two girls. And in the UK, they had been, even though we ate well as a family and had
Mhm.
lots of veg and salad, the fact that they would go for tea after school with their friends, and it was always nuggets and chips, pizzas and chips,
Yeah.
sausages and chips. They were fussy, faddy eaters, and they would
Mhm.
only eat kind of chicken nuggets. And we'd literally been here for about 6 weeks. And my eldest daughter said to me, "Mum, can you please make proper chickens like all my friends' mums do?" And I was like,
Ooh.
whoa. I, peer pressure, but
Mhm.
it's so good because you get 3-year-olds eating camembert with their school lunch.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
My son,
incredible.
yeah, my son, he's 2 years old, so he's in daycare, French daycare, public daycare, and, I look at the menu and there's, like, beets on the menu and all kinds of different veg. There's sardine or fish at least once per week on the menu. That's yeah. It really opens up their palate very early on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I noticed that, and I think that's a really massive plus point in favour of French education. What did you I mean, obviously food's very different and the school day's very different. What else did you notice in terms of difference between France and the US?
It's a lot of little things, I think. This is something that comes up all the time, but it's so true, saying bonjour when you meet someone the first time. But that expands to also something that shocked me was that, when you walk into a doctor's office and you're in the waiting room, if there's people there, you also say bonjour to them. So that bonjour is really about when you enter someone's, I guess, personal or close space, you say bonjour to them, you greet them. Whereas in the US, we don't do that. That it would be seen as a bit intrusive, perhaps. It's not necessarily not polite, but you just you let people do what they're doing.
Yeah, no, no, no. I that was another one for me, and realizing that you couldn't just walk into any kind of workplace, business place, shop, and address somebody directly without
Hmm.
having done the bonjour,
Yeah.
and they were not going to respond to you until you'd bonjoured them and vice versa. But
Yes.
I also noticed with the doctors' waiting rooms, I mean, it really surprised me that everybody sits in silence.
Oh
Nobody
yeah.
makes there's no conversation or chit chat.
Hmm. Oh
Yeah.
gosh, you just reminded me that at the daycare near the beginning of the year there was like a welcome for parents to come into, and I was quite excited, I guess, because I thought I would meet a bunch of different parents. It would be a nice time. I walk into the room and there's already a bunch of French parents there, and they're just sitting silent, no chit chat, no one's talking. It made me so anxious. It's, it's such different way of approaching that kind of situation.
Yeah. Oh, I noticed so many different things about the education system. I mean, the sort of emphasis on, at a very early age, doing the kind of you must underline this in green and
Mm,
you must, colour within the lines and this has to be done like that. There's much less kind of flexibility and
mhm,
creativity. I mean, it is changing a bit. I can see that now because my grandson is 2.5 and he's just
mhm.
started at school. It's very, very slowly because he's quite a handful, shall we say. I can see that it's become a lot more laid back than it was when my son, who's 24, started here. So over the last
Mhm,
20 years, things have changed, but it's
for
still
sure.
a whole different ball game to the UK where, children up to the age of 5 are expected to just kind of run around the classroom and play with
Mhm.
sand and generally cause carnage, and here it's sitting down and, I guess it's that kind of preparing people to, integrate into society and public
Mhm.
and life,
Yeah,
which is probably good, but I think it
probably.
yeah, it can also be a bit of a shock for parents because it's a bit more restrictive, I
That's the word I
think.
was about to use, restrictive, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I did have quite a few kind of arguments, especially with primary school teachers about
Mm.
my son who's colorblind. And I was saying, you cannot just go through all of his work with a red pen because he can't see it. It's not a bad
Oh
thing
my
to
god.
him. So
Yeah.
I think there's much more. And having done a
Hmm.
lot of teaching myself for about 15 years in France, I think that one of the big problems with French education is it sort of instills a slight level of fear into people, and they don't have the confidence that maybe they do in Anglo-Saxon countries. I mean, I don't know what you found as a French teacher in the US, if your students were happy to try and speak French, were they?
I hope so. I so and that was, a big difference for me teaching French in the US versus English here in an elementary school. For me, a language should be spoken. It's a tool. It needs to be used. So in any language classroom, you should hear talking. And so in every day in my classroom, kids would be talking every day. And I use that also, that same method that makes sense to me when I was teaching English in elementary school. And a couple of times I had some teachers walk down the hallway to knock on my door. And so in France, in the French elementary school, French teachers coming and saying, "You guys are really loud." And we were just talking at normal voices. That was something that struck me when I would walk down the hallway in the French elementary school. There was barely any talking.
Yeah.
Kids were sitting at their desks, individual desks in rows. It's very much individual personalized work and less group work. They would come together in groups sometimes, but in the US, especially, perhaps in the UK as well, there's a much more focus on doing partnered work, group work, talking, discussing, expanding on other people's ideas and talking in world language classrooms.
Yeah, no, I had exactly the same experience. I never taught in anything prior to kind of high school, but I did have BTS students. And, again, I found they were sort of 18 plus. Their big issue was they thought they were crap at English, and because they'd been told they were crap at
Mm,
English for however many years, and their accents weren't correct, so nobody would speak. And, again, I had that thing of people knocking on the door and saying, could you keep it down a bit in here? Because I would rearrange all the desks,
yeah.
make group work tables. And obviously with 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds, it's a lot easier than
Hmm.
elementary level. And we did theatre and acting, and I'd give them random characters and tell them to do improv, and they
Hmm.
absolutely loved it. And then they all started talking, and it could get quite riotous. But riotous is not something that happens in French schools generally.
Yeah.
So you've been here for 7 years. You're obviously very integrated because you've got a Frenchman in your life and you had a child here. And how did you find the whole giving birth experience? I suppose you couldn't compare it if it was your first one, but did you
Um,
find it,
I felt very well taken care of throughout the whole pregnancy. And when I compare it to my friends back in the States, I had, the same amount of checkpoints and things like that, but I also had things that they didn't necessarily have. Like there were preparation classes leading up to the birth that were provided by the state. So the whole lead up where I went to the hospital and stuff like that, I did a public hospital. Everything was good. I stayed in the hospital for I don't know, how long was it? 3 days? That was a blur to me, but um, but longer than my friends in the US who, after 24 hours, if everything was good, they'd be out of the hospital. They'd be back home. And then, after giving birth, then you're checked in on, I had a midwife who came to my apartment in Paris to check on me and the baby. She weighed the baby. She checked on me. Like I felt very well taken care of. And then you have your rééducation as well, for your abs and also just to rework everything down there to make sure everything is good. They take care of you. So yeah.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I noticed, not that I haven't had a baby in France, but my daughter has. And again,
Mm,
massive difference to the UK where, I mean, I can understand in the States people leaving after 24 hours because you kind of pay, everything's insurance related. So you've got,
mhm,
but in the UK, healthcare is meant to be, well, it's free at the point of delivery. But
mhm.
that means that there isn't the budget. So nobody stays in hospital. I mean, I left 3
Mm.
hours after I had my second one,
Oh, wow. Okay.
24 hours with the first one. So yeah, I found healthcare very different and very, very good overall.
Mhm.
Um, so downsides, what are the downsides that you've discovered about life in France?
Downsides, well, the rigidity that you mentioned. paperwork. Although I'm technically kind of done with most paperwork now because I am French now, so I have my French passport. Um, but there's that, you still have to deal with certain systems that feel very archaic for no reason, very paper based. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's just very slow, and I think, especially as an American, we really prioritize efficiency and getting things done, and just being done with the process, finding the quickest way to do something.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, exactly the same for me. I've been in France now, I think 23, 24 years. And when we came, it was kind of pre-internet and pre
Mhm.
everything being done online. And it was just unbelievable. Can remember trying to get a phone line connected, and I had to get an electricity bill to prove to the phone line company that I had a house and was capable of having utility bills, and I couldn't get the electricity bill. I couldn't get the electricity installed because I didn't have a phone line. And it was just like, it was kind of unbelievable, and the same
Mhm.
with the banks as well. Again, French banks have got better, and there's,
Mhm.
increasing online banks and stuff. But again, coming from an Anglo-Saxon country where banking is kind of either very cheap or free, and it's
Mhm.
instantaneous, and
Yeah.
people are polite and helpful and say, "Anything else I can do for you today?" The shock of dealing with French banks was just something else.
Yeah.
And I've now got all of my kind of French friends, whatever, using Revolut, and they can't believe how it works. And you can just
Mhm.
access your money and up your payment limit and
What a
change
novel
your own
idea.
PIN number. Wow.
It's crazy.
And cashback as well, which is very gradually
Mhm.
coming to France. I don't know, do you have the cashback in the States?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, exactly. I mean, it was in the UK kind of 30 years
Mhm.
ago when I left, along with self-scanning shopping trolleys. And, is France is, I reckon the UK is always behind the US, and then France is around 15 years behind the UK.
Yeah.
So you can pretty much predict whatever's going to take off in France. And you just sort of look at those trends,
Yeah.
and then, and now, unfortunately, I would say it's obesity, because the French are definitely getting fatter and eating more processed food.
There's so much fast food that's taken over.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Have you noticed a difference in the time since you've been here?
Yeah, Paris is constantly changing with new places showing up, but the amount of, McDonald's and fast food, and now I don't know if you heard about this, the crousty poulet, which is like a crispy chicken and rice, but that's all it is. There's no vegetable, and that's all over Paris right now. It's called
Oh,
crousty.
really? Christy. So that's kind of like your KFC equivalent.
Yeah.
Wow. But on balance, do you think that your life here in France is, I mean, I guess it's a difficult question to answer because, having fallen in love with a Frenchman, you're kind of, I guess it's one of those situations where one partner always has to move to the other partner's country.
Mhm.
Do you think on balance that your life in France is, better than your life in the US would be if you'd stayed?
I think there's a lot of things that could be qualified as better, but it's mostly just different, I think. I think anywhere I lived, I would adapt to it. But there's a lot of things that I'm very much grateful for in France, especially the healthcare.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, no, I think the healthcare it's a big factor actually. And I think that's one of the reasons why I wouldn't actually feel safe going back to the UK,
Mm,
because the healthcare there is so bad now. I mean, it's great if you're in a road traffic accident or somebody shoots you or stabs you and you get taken in and it's a life and death situation. If you're waiting for kind of standard treatment like a
mm,
knee replacement or something, or preventative health care, then
mm,
it's not so great at all. And it, really varies from place to place. I guess
mhm.
that's true of the States as well.
Yes, absolutely. And pricing is not transparent at all in the US. So it actually makes me nervous when I travel back to the US now with my family,
Mm.
because we don't have healthcare there, and it would cost so much more. So I'm taking out, a medical travel insurance every time we go back to the US now to make sure that we're covered in case we need to go and take care of something.
And how often do you manage to get back to the States?
About at least once a year we've managed. Yeah. It's a big trip though, especially for
Yeah.
the 2-year-old.
Yeah. And how is it being so geographically far from your family?
It's definitely not easy. Uh, you miss out on a lot of milestones, on friends' milestones and things like that. And I have friends who are in various places in the U.S. too. So even when I go and visit them, I feel like I'm trucking around trying to see as many people as possible. But you're not there for their day-to-day lives. A lot of my friends have kids now as well. So I'm just watching them grow up from a distance and not being there to see them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess I've been luckier in the respect that it's easier to get back to the UK, obviously, than
Mm.
it is to the States. And but I have exactly the same with my brother who's in Australia and
Oh.
my nephews who, I haven't seen for nearly 15 years. And, the
Mhm.
last time I was playing trains with them on the floor, and now I see them on Facebook and they're adults. And
Yeah.
it's tough, but it's just distance, and
Mhm.
it's just impossible to to have the time and the money to make those long haul trips on a really regular basis.
Mhm. And we obviously are lucky when the technology works. We can, do the phone calls or the video calls. So there's that, but it's not the same as being in person.
No, 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 it's definitely not. It's definitely not. Well, thank you so much for coming on this morning, Ellen, and chatting to us a bit about the differences in terms of the cultural difference, shall we say, between the US and France. It's been really interesting, and it's a subject that I love talking about because it's always those little things that you're just kind of like, oh, wow, that's did not expect that one coming. Still
Mhm.
makes me laugh when I see French people putting water on the back of their necks before they get into the ocean.
Yeah.
Especially as the sea temperature here is so much warmer than it is in the
Mhm.
UK. And no, we don't have hundreds of people all dropping dead on the beaches from le choc thermique.
Yeah.
But yeah, it makes for an interesting life. Well, thank you again. Thank you for coming on. Thank you as always to our sponsors, Fab French Insurance, who make your life as simple as Frenchly possible. We will be back next week with a couple more guests, and I think there's a couple of new episodes coming out in between now and then. So thank you all very much for listening, and please do follow us on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps in terms of helping other listeners to find us. Thank you for listening, and see you next time. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye.